Welcome to The Holistic Nurse with your host, Peggy Smith. Peggy will introduce and educate her viewers about the differences between alternative, holistic, and complementary medical therapies. Her goal is to empower the lay medical consumer to learn how to advocate for themselves. So now, please welcome the host of The Holistic Nurse, Peggy Smith.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of The Holistic Nurse with Peggy Smith. We began a theme last week. This is going to be the second of a two-part series on uh, the link between trauma and addiction. And our guest, Dr. Mike Murphy, who was with us last week to start the topic, he will be joining us again and going in a little more detail some of the things that we didn't get to last week. So, Mike, would you like to join us?
It's great to be here again, Peggy, with you again.
Thank
I was
you.
so excited last time with the response to our previous uh, presentation on this very powerful and deep and complex issue that affects so many people, so many millions of people out there who are just deeply and profoundly affected by issues of substance abuse dependency, some kind of dependency, and the issue of addiction and its relationship to trauma. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to get deep into it. So I
Yeah, what
appreciate the
you
opportunity to talk
mentioned
about it.
actually just triggered another idea. I think we'll be doing a show on codependence to follow up with this sometime in the near future. But when we talk about trauma and addiction, as we pointed out last week, the conversation isn't about judging or labeling people, and it's not something to be ashamed of, but it's about understanding why we or our family members, and if it affects our family members, it affects everybody in the family. Um, so can you talk a little bit about exactly what trauma is and why it has such an important role in this topic?
Trauma is really such a deep and complex issue. The first point, I think, is that trauma is something that happens to us. It's not something that is voluntary. It's not something we ask to have happen to us. It's an event that happens to us that is so difficult and so painful and so complex and so deeply disturbing that we can't really believe that it's real. There's a part of our brain that will actually deny that this could possibly be happening. I mean, you see this oftentimes with people. So the most common example is war veterans who have been involved in brutal war-related situations over the many centuries of humanity. And World War I, World War II, Vietnam. A lot of people came back from Vietnam with the symptoms of uh, trauma. And clearly, they had gone over there expecting to be involved in a noble cause, doing the right thing, serving their country. And what they ended up involved in was something that was truly horrible. Friends being killed, colleagues being wounded, themselves being harmed, seeing violence and witnessing uh, some experiences that they found so disturbing that there's a part of their brain that just couldn't believe that they were real. So that's kind of the central characteristic of trauma. It's something that's so extreme and disturbing that there's a part of us. Oftentimes when we're children, maybe we're subjected to trauma or extreme neglect, and this happens to millions of people all across the world, certainly in the United States. And so many people experience childhood-based trauma and they as children just can't believe that it's real. So there's a part of their brain that is not adequately processing the experience of trauma. And so that's the work that needs to be done uh, for people uh, in treatment and over the course of their lifetime.
And sometimes I think we just touched very briefly last week about generational trauma, and we're going to have a show specifically on that down the road. But generational trauma can create traumatic and PTSD symptoms, and the people here at that in the present moment really haven't had that experience to the degree that people in earlier generations had. Um, but our brain seems to not be able to distinguish sometimes between the present and what happened either when we were a childhood or, just even just a couple of, if you're in a horrible fire or something and, you witness something like that, uh, your mind is not sure if it's real or whether it's happening over and over. Every time you hear a fire siren, you might react as if it's happening again. Kind of like even something as simple as when you go to a funeral, it's a common human reaction to while you're there, you start thinking about all the other funerals you've ever been to in your entire life. And, not sure why we do that, but we do. But these are all just ways of our brain trying to help us survive. Um, so are we surviving maybe to avoid the pain that the memories bring, or are we surviving on a more instinctual basis level? Like the seasons change and the birds know they have to migrate or they're not going to survive. Are we that instinctive or are we a little more complicated? I'd like to think we're more
Right. So
complicated.
certainly with trauma, we're doing something that we think will improve our chances of survival. So the way that we uh, process a traumatic experience that may have occurred in our childhood or maybe our young adulthood or later, some kind of experience, as mentioned before, that we just can't quite believe is real, then what happens with that memory is that it does not get processed into long-term memory. So normally, if we remember a nice time when we went to the beach or we spent time with our family or we went with our children to a park or something like that, those memories are distributed throughout the brain in the different regions of the brain that have to do with the different sensory areas of experiencing, right? Olfactory or smell, auditory or sound, vision related, sound related, and all of the different kinesthetic, touch. So we process the memory into different regions of the brain where it's stored. And then later on, if we want to remember that memory, we reach in to the brain, and this part of the brain called the hippocampus will sort of go to all those different areas of the brain and bring them back together into an integrated image so that we can store and retrieve the memory as we want it to happen. But when trauma occurs, the memory stays in what's called working memory. It stays right in front of our face. So many people have told you in your long uh, years of treating people, and me too, in jails and prisons and psychiatric hospitals, people who have trauma will say over and over again that um, they feel like it just happened yesterday, even though it may have happened 25 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 10 years ago. So it stays in what's called working memory. And working memory is that part of the brain that keeps the things that really need to be dealt with now. What are you going to do today? What do you need to do when you get home with your kids? What do you need to do for dinner? What do you need to do in order to deal with the class you have today? All the stuff you have to deal with right now. That's called working memory. That's the blackboard of the brain. And so trauma stays in that area of the brain. And that is terribly problematic for people who have trauma because it seems like it's always there. You don't get to store it in the distant regions of the brain. So that's one of the things that we'll be talking about in terms of how we can make that transfer of the traumatic memory from the working memory where it's right in front of us all the time to the uh, storage areas of the brain where we can put it away into the file cabinet, into the closet, and leave it there and retrieve it when we want it. So that's the sort of one of the key aspects of the trauma. And it's such a difficult thing for so many people. And we'll be talking about the methods that, people have been doing more and more research in that area and really discovering the reality of how that can be addressed now much more effectively.
Well, the mind really is a little bit tricky. I've seen situations where two siblings now, in their later years, just recalling a picnic or something in their childhood. And although they were both there and with each other during that same experience, the memories are totally different. One sibling will say, well, gee, I don't remember that, but I remember this. And it just, your mind has a way of picking out what you need to get to feel safe in a situation. And what was pleasant for you, might have been stressful for a sibling. And when we talk about things that happen to people that are unfortunate and abusive or just, not right for children, and they're now dealing with it as an adult, it's very challenging to get a client to understand that, the things that happened to you as a child really weren't your fault. Whatever you did to survive and cope, that's what you had to do at that moment. But when you look at it at a distance from years, sometimes that adult is still feeling like the child that's being abused, and because it was such a as bad as the situation is, some children will keep adults too keep repeating patterns of behavior that result in similar abusive situations, because as bad as it is, it's familiar, and familiarity brings a certain degree of comfort. And addiction, we right away think of the substance abuse, things like that. But um, anything that is excessive, we take everything's on a spectrum, including our behaviors and our, habits. So an addiction can be something healthy, like, maybe running to an extreme or working on workaholic too much. There's a point where you can only spend so much money, and money's not the reason you're a workaholic. You're working because something is driving in your brain to maybe protect yourself from feelings the same way a physical substance like alcohol or drugs might protect you from experiencing unpleasant feelings or memories. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I really think that whole image is just so profound and significant for the people who have experienced these disturbing experiences called trauma, because they feel like they need to find a way to deal with the feelings that go along with the traumatic memory. So when the traumatic memory emerges, it's called triggering, and anything can trigger it. The famous example is the backfiring of a car will remind a World War II soldier, Vietnam soldier, or somebody who served in Iraq of the explosions that they heard back then, and boom, the memory comes back out. It's triggered by the just a normal and natural event in daily life. So the memory can be easily evoked from uh, the more distant areas of the brain by any kind of triggering mechanism or stimulus that causes the memory to come back out. And when it comes back out, the person feels anxiety, they feel fear, they feel nervousness, they feel maybe discomfort in their stomach or tension in their muscles. So they really feel like they need something to make those bad feelings go away. And that oftentimes is the source of addiction. I mean, people will learn to take something, whether it can be anything, all the way from marijuana to alcohol to cocaine, opioids, whatever tranquilizers somebody takes in order to try to limit the negative experiences of the traumatic memory when it gets triggered. And that's one of the roots of addiction, as you're well aware. When people repeatedly experience the reinforcement of using a substance that for a few seconds helps them to be relieved of the anxiety and fear and agitation that accompanies the triggering of the traumatic memory.
So I guess this re-triggering of things, even somebody that's been in recovery, 10, 15, 20 years, talk a little bit about why relapse occurs. And in fact, actually, we're going to talk about that when we come back after the break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Sounds great.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. author, radio show host, and coach, John M. Hawkins, reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Hi, welcome back to the Holistic Nurse with Peggy Smith as we're exploring part 2 of the link between trauma and addictions and how we can become whole again. Dr. Murphy, talk a little bit about relapse and the struggles.
Right. So relapse is almost always a cycle. They talk about the cycle of addiction, and part of the cycle of addiction is relapse. People may have a period of sobriety, whether it's a day or 20 years, that they may be substance and symptom free. And what typically will contribute to relapse is what's called a negative emotional state. So that's why it's very important to be vigilant and aware with regard to how we feel and to engage in practices that we feel will help us to prevent us from falling into a negative emotional state, whether it's meditation or exercise or socialization, reading, yoga, whatever we do. If we tend to find ourselves involved in a situation in which we are feeling nervous and anxious and sad and agitated, then that's a situation where we're going to tend to be tempted to relapse, because the reinforcing power of the substance, of the addictive substance, is always in its ability to relieve discomfort, at least momentarily. And that's why people who have a dependency feel worried and concerned about their capacity to maintain sobriety. That's why they need support. That's why programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and other group support programs are so important and necessary, because they offer the substance dependent person the support that they need in order to get through those hard times that are characterized by the negative emotional state. I mean, if you're in a negative emotional state, you need to get to a meeting, perhaps, if that's part of your program. And that helps you to be able to get through that negative emotional state without relapsing. And, when you do that, you realize you can. You realize you can go through a negative emotional state and not relapse. It's interesting, working in jails and prisons for decades as I did, I would talk to people who came into prison on substances, and then over the course of a week or two, they would experience what's called a hard detox. They'd become clean. They'd go through 2 weeks with no substance. Then they'd come to meet with me, and they would say, the first thing they would say is, I've never felt better in my life. This is coming here to jail, and being in this jail is the best thing that ever happened to me, because they were back. They were back to being who they are. They were free of the addiction. They were free of that feeling of cycle of dependency, of the use of the substance, becoming high, experiencing withdrawal, seeking out the substance again. That cycle, they were free of it, and now they were who they are again. So returning to your personality is just very, very gratifying. And the process of recovery and sobriety is just one of the most positive experiences that people can ever have. And I've heard it on just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of occasions when people do go through the process of withdrawal. They understand sobriety, they maintain sobriety, and they really feel that they're back to being themselves. And it's a wonderful experience to have.
it does take a team or a village, I think, to get to the other side of this. But I want to point out that not everybody can just do it cold turkey or do it without the professionals' help. And that for certain substances that you might be addicted to do it without medical supervision actually puts your life in danger. Uh, a medical professional, will have medications that are not addictive that need to control your vital signs and the normal physiological responses of withdrawal. And if you don't have that available, you can have a very negative outcome, worse than the addiction. Uh, so the holistic tools that we mentioned and the meetings and the support, and most people start this battle without their family and loved ones support because they burned those bridges years ago. Um, but you can create new support. You can't just say, "Well, my family threw me away, so I must not be worth anything," and I'm never going to amount to anything or overcome this. And so I think a lot of the non-medical support involves in actually teaching a person how to love themselves and realize their self-worth. Um, as a psychologist, I'm sure that that's one of your things. And shame is really and learning to forgive yourself actually for being in this situation. You may still have to deal with real consequences for behavior that occurred during your addiction time. That's why you're in the prison system, perhaps. But it doesn't have to still define who you are in any moment. You're still a basic human person with all the skills and everything you were born with. Um, and it's a struggle. You want to offer some insight on that?
That's exactly correct. And one of the things I think that it's important to point out is that we were meant to deal with struggle. We as human beings really are equipped to do hard things. And recovery is one of the hard things that we are sometimes called upon to do, all of us, whether we may be addicted to poor food, poor eating habits, overexercise, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is that is a destructive habit that we happen to be involved in some kind of repeated way. We are equipped to engage in the struggle of recovery. We uh, can do that. And when we do that, it really improves self-esteem. I mean, this is one of the deep insights of psychology is that the only way to really improve self-esteem, how good we feel about ourselves, to have good self-esteem is to accomplish something that is difficult. And certainly recovery from substance dependency, opioid use disorder, cocaine, alcohol, whatever it is, um, to go through that process of detoxification and maintaining sobriety is difficult. It's a real challenge, but it does result in improvement of our self-esteem because we just did something that's really hard. And that's why meetings, when you go to AA meetings, they're such positive environments. I mean, so many people are so pleased because they're getting through the day and being sober and going on and living the day and just realizing that the only thing they can do is be sober right now, be sober today, be clean today, and live their life in a responsible way. And that is the key of the 12 steps. So if you get into the 12 steps of recovery, which so many people have been involved with all around the world, it's just a great program that really is a means of obtaining the support that we need to be able to accomplish this very difficult and challenging task that then raises our self-esteem. And we feel like, yes, I can do this. I am doing it. I have done it. I've done it for years. I've been sober for 25 years. I've been sober for 15 years. It really is a sense of pride and satisfaction and sharing with others who are sharing the same journey.
So we touched a little bit last week about the importance of a safe connection, um, just in the human existence. You know, you can see it even in like unwanted puppies that get abandoned, and the difference in the transformation. Um, talk about how do you really learn to trust again, to feel safe, and to trust yourself that you can do it. That's a large part of it, no matter what the noise on the outside is. There are people
Yeah,
that want you to fail so that they can continue that lie, that image, because and sometimes your partners as a party in the relationship gets healthier, the other one declines, and they might try to sabotage it because they've learned to feel good when you're not doing so well. They feel, talk about that human phenomenon.
Right. That's the issue you mentioned earlier of codependency. When people get together and the person who is what we used to call the enabler, I mean, the person who sort of uh, creates a situation in which the substance dependent person can sort of go on with their lives, even though they're in the process of using substances in a way that is destructive for them. The enabler sort of helps them to get by, calls the boss and says, "Oh, he's got the flu," when in fact he's detoxing or he's intoxicated or something like that, and that's why he's not showing up at work. So that dynamic of codependency is certainly a part of recovery, and dealing with that, having to come clean, if you will, with regard to being honest with our loved ones about who we are and what we actually are doing and how we actually can be helpful to the other person, to the person who we love. I mean, how can we really be supportive of them in terms of them maintaining their sobriety? And it's only through what's called scrupulous honesty. You have to refuse to lie for that person's benefit or use deceitfulness. I mean, you have to be scrupulously honest with them in terms of your own experience. This is how this is affecting me. This is how your behavior is affecting me. I need to share that honestly with you. And I'm only going to do that which is helpful to you and loving toward you. I'm not going to help you continue in this destructive pattern. I'm going to pull myself away and not engage in behaviors that seem to support your continued self-destructive behavior. So those realizations in the relationship, dealing with the codependency issues, and getting involved in the nuts and bolts of daily sobriety, dealing with one's feelings every day, every moment of every day of sobriety without recourse to the addictive substance is really the key. And so many images of it's like a resurrection, when you actually are able to uh, become alive again, fully alive again, to the fact that you are who you are and you can be who you are. And so many recovering people who have experienced that, have gone through substance dependency and then become clean and sober, experience that sense of being reborn, that you really are who you are now. And you get to experience the magic of this life in a way that is has all the remarkable qualities that it has the potential to have. And it's a great thing to observe and share. And I've had the chance to see that over and over again on just many, many hundreds of occasions in the institutions where I've sought to be of service to people.
And yeah, the reference to the 12-step programs and everything, families of the family member who's struggling and going through this, I think it's equally important that they participate in something like Al-Anon or, because they need the support too. And they need to be able to have an objective view of what they're experiencing day to day and know that it's not a failure on, you're not a bad spouse because you couldn't stop them from drinking. Sometimes the enabler actually says it's their fault. Or maybe, I spent too much money. I drove them to drink. There's a lot of things like that. We're moving right along here. We're going to take another break and be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hi, welcome back to the Holistic Nurse with Peggy Smith and with Dr. Michael Murphy. He's an author of a book came out earlier this year, Opioid Odyssey. Would you like to talk a few minutes about your book and how that came about?
I'll be happy to talk about it. This is it right here, Opioid Odyssey. You can find it on Amazon. And it's a happy opioid crisis book, if you will. It's about a whole bunch of stories of individuals who became dependent on drugs, mainly on opioid type substances, and desperately needed that substance every day. And then they were able to reclaim their lives. And with the assistance of a supportive treatment system, they were able to become sober and get back to their lives of loving their family and caring for their family and working productively and being prominent members of their community and having really positive and constructive lives. That's what the book is about. It's a whole bunch of stories of actual individuals who did that, who were pretty much at the bottom of the barrel, as damaged and as struggling as you could possibly be, and then from that they came back to being really productive citizens, happy, functioning, good relationships, employment, all that stuff. So these are the stories of how they did it, how they managed to do it one day at a time and to live their lives in ways that allowed them to be the fully functioning persons that they have longed to be. And that's what the book is about. It's sort of what the elements of that are. And really, as many people know who are in recovery, it takes a bunch of different elements coming together at the same time to make recovery work. The support system that you need, maybe some kind of medical treatment and care that offers the opportunity to detox in a more compassionate way, in a more healthy way. Maybe the support and love of relatives who are with you. Maybe the opportunity to do kind of physical exercise and other forms of activity that help you to get through the time in healthy ways. So there are many pieces to the puzzle of recovery, just as there's many pieces to the puzzle of becoming people who we possibly can be. We all understand that if we want to be the best version of ourselves, we can only do that one day at a time. We just have to do that today. I can be the best person I can be today. I can't do tomorrow until tomorrow. I can't change yesterday. So when I can do it really is now. So the book is a moving collection of stories that really describe how quite a number of people successfully traversed that road of recovery. And it was a great honor to write it and to hear their stories. And they're there. And I think you all would be touched by them as well.
Well, I think when you're supporting somebody who's struggling with various types of addictions, it doesn't mean that you're supporting or agreeing or enabling the harmful behavior. Um, you have to have healthy support includes setting boundaries. Both of you learning, many times if you're an adult and you've succumbed to the various demons of addiction, it's often because when you were younger, your boundaries were violated constantly. You didn't learn how to set boundaries. And people often don't realize how important simple words are. Um, if you're growing up and you're getting hit in the head with your math book and someone's telling you, you're stupid, you're never going to go to college, or that you believe them after a while. And it's as an adult, you still hear those voices in your head. And if you're looking at your partner, your family one that you're trying to help, telling them that they're a failure or they're weak or, just imperfect, it reinforces shame and it makes the process take a lot longer. Um, Many addictions include grief, abandonment, unresolved trauma, um, and healing's not easy, and neither is just for somebody who maybe doesn't have addictions but wants to change unhelpful behaviors. I think it starts off with just like the 12 step, admitting, I am an alcoholic. I have behaviors I would like to change, and I'm not an alcoholic. You know what I mean? It's the same thought processes. You have to take accountability for what you want to change, or nothing's going to happen. Um,
Right. One of the things that I think you're referring to is what's described in the program as resentments. So if you have a sponsor who's helping to guide you through the steps of recovery, or a medical clinician who's helping you in the process of recovery, you really need to have that partner who's going to be there for you as you go through this change in your lifestyle. It's not, every recovering person knows that it's not easy. It does involve some struggle, but when you engage in that struggle, it's so rewarding to reclaim your life and reclaim the life that you have had before and that you can have again. And I think part of that process, as you say, is to deal with one's resentments. I mean, the relationships that one may have had, the difficulties that one may have experienced in the past that we talk about as trauma. I mean, we were victims of trauma. I mean, things happen. We didn't ask for them to happen. They happened to us. So we carry that around with us. And so one of the things that we deal with in the process of recovery is to deal with those resentments and start the process of letting go, unpacking those resentments and starting to put them back in some kind of storage area where they can be less disturbing to our daily functioning. And that's the key. So you really need to do that with somebody else. You need to talk with either a clinician or a sponsor or someone like that who can hear your description of those kind of toxic relationships that you may have experienced and those traumatic experiences you may have experienced, that then allows you to let go of them and realize that you can contain those experiences and not allow them to motivate you toward self-destructive behaviors anymore. And if you have the support to go through the day, using meetings, using medical assisted treatment, using whatever kind of care you need in order to maintain your sobriety, that is just very reinforcing. I mean, it's so gratifying to be able to live the day the best you can, being the person who you really can be at your best, and to realize at the end of the day that you've successfully accomplished that journey of sobriety and self-completion.
I think, a really good sponsor is somebody that, as they're supporting you and they're providing an honest look in the mirror, when they're not perfect themselves, they're going through their own struggles at the same time. But it doesn't mean that a sponsor is gonna, when you're backsliding, uh, continue to enable that. Uh, that they might say something like, "Well, I recognize you're going through a hard time right now, uh, but I don't condone the choices you're making, and you're ready to come back to the program. We're here with open arms, but I'm not going down that road with you."
Right.
Um, and it's part of getting you to the point to acknowledge that only you can really change yourself, no matter how, and it's kind of a phrase, no matter where we came from, we grow up anyway. And once,
Right.
that's a superpower, becoming an adult, and we can change all those things that we didn't like as when we were children, but not
That's a
advocate.
great insight. I mean, when we fall down, we have to pick ourselves up once again. So that's the deal. When you fall down, you don't have to analyze the whole thing, or justify it or whatever. You just have to pick yourself up and start walking again and put one foot in front of the other. And if you pay attention to that, just living the day, staying in the present, doing what you can to care for yourself, then just amazing things are possible. And reclaiming your life is something that can really serve to give this life the kind of magic that it can have when we're really living and living well. And we really have an opportunity now, I think, in this day and age to create a much better world. If we all join together and support each other in this process of living the life we were meant to live to the fullest.
I think that's just a comment on just human nature, and the, the the thing as we're beginning to, we still have a little bit more time left. What would you like to add as far as something maybe we haven't covered yet, or where people can?
Well,
How
yeah.
do you learn to
What,
love yourself? You're a psychologist. How do you learn you can mimic, is mimicking certain behaviors and patterns enough? Or, I mean, it's got to be incorporated inside your deepest part of your brain and heart. How do you learn to do that?
exactly. Exactly. So that's a great question. And really, what we need to do is to create positive habits. So the great psychologist William James said that the more constructive and healthy habits we can create, and we don't need to think about brushing our teeth a couple of times a day or a few times a day. We just do it. Automatically do the right thing. Automatically do the things that you need to do in order to maintain your well-being. One of those things is to have a practice. I think a morning practice, making sure that the first thing you do as soon as your feet hit the floor is you engage in some kind of self-care activity, whether it's meditation, yoga, nutrition, walking, prayer, uh, whatever you put together as a program of recovery so you can start off on the right foot. So first thing you do when you get up in the morning is to create a practice for yourself that comprises those essential elements that you need. And you can go online and find those things, or you can make it up for yourself. Meditation, as we said, yoga, prayer, chanting, all those things, going to a meeting, what you need to put together, all of us need to put together the unique ingredients that each of us need to create the program that will help us to be the person that we can be fully.
And I think that advice applies to people in any walk of life or with any challenges they face. Um,
Right.
it's nobody wants to get up when the alarm first goes off, and the personal assistant that starts with an A, after a couple times I'd say, would you call me back in a half hour? After the third time, she says, "Does it really matter? Are you going to get up today?" It's,
Right. Yes.
thanks, Alexa. But we all have those days where we just don't want to do it for, whatever. Maybe there's an important thing that we're dreading doing, at work or something. But if you start off with a structured ritual gives you a sense of security and
Right, right.
safety.
So the morning ritual is just really important. And then also clarifying what we want to do with our lives. Who are we? What is the meaning of life? What do I want to be? What do I want to contribute to the world? Asking those hard questions and coming up with an answer. We have the right to determine what those answers should be. I happen to choose a path of becoming a psychologist and seeking to be of service to others in that way. Okay, well, that's what I try to do to the best of my ability every day. Each of us needs to make that choice for ourselves in terms of what we contribute to the world, our families, our community. And I think once we do that, we start that positive cycle that really leads to making our lives better and making the world a better place.
That's a wonderful way to end this section. We'll be right back after another quick break and kind of summarize everything.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Hi, welcome back to the Holistic Nurse with Peggy Smith. We're here today with Dr. Michael J. Murphy, who is a forensic psychologist working with addictions for returning residents and citizens that aren't quite returning yet. We just have a few minutes left, Michael, in the show. What messages would you like to send everybody home with?
So I think the key is to just work on oneself. I mean, every recovering person knows that it starts with each one of us in terms of structuralizing our lives in ways that will be healthy for us. And I think that's the key. There's an opportunity now, I think, that we can talk about maybe at more length on another occasion, but technology is really coming on now, perhaps in some really positive ways. I mean, the introduction of, for example, self-driving cars, the solar power, all that kind of stuff is starting to come on in ways that may allow us to have more freedom, more opportunity to give to others, less likelihood that we are going to be overwhelmed by the necessities and obligations of daily exhausting work. So I think that one of the things that we can really need to focus on now is being positive, daring to hope, if you will, to hope that things are going to get better. Things are getting better now. Humanity is learning better and better how to deal with other people in a respectful way, in being kind, being compassionate toward others in all situations. So I think, that's something that is coming now, I think, and that we'll have the opportunity to exercise more and more really in the near future. These things are going to be happening in the next few years. We're going to see huge transformations in the opportunities that await us on this planet. So I think it's really something where we need to tell ourselves, this can get better. This can be fully satisfying. We can find a way to meet the needs of other people and ourselves in really healthy, constructive ways, and turn this planet into the paradise that it was meant to be and can be. So, that I think is the key, is just to start with the positive mentality that growth is possible. It's going to happen. There's many people out there who are loving people, who want to be supportive to us and to others. And our job is just to do what we can to contribute to that loving environment, that caring environment of mutual support and cooperation with each other.
Well, I think it's important to use the technology to enhance that effort, but I can't discount in any way the importance of the human connection. And as you were talking, but technology and being overwhelmed and everything, I got an image in my head of when I was a child, the TV show Lost in Space, and that was one of the first robots. I thought he was so cool. I don't remember his name, but whenever he got really overwhelmed, he short circuited, and just the wires came out, and that's kind of how we feel sometimes as people.
Right. And I think in those moments, we have to be ready to come to our own defense, I think. And really being your own best friend, that old statement, I mean, being on your own side and helping yourself to, it's easy to do well when things are going the way that we want them to go. The question is whether we can really be there for ourselves when times are harder and more challenging. And that's the key to maybe get up and make part of our morning mantra, our morning meditation routine, to have a statement in which I'm going to be as supportive of myself as I can be in all ways throughout this day. I mean, I'm going to say that mantra over and over again, and I'm going to really um, seek to be present first and foremost for myself in a caring and compassionate way. And I will do everything I can do. I'll give all I can possibly give. I'll accept it when I'm not able to give something because I don't have the opportunity or the resources to do that. And I'll move on and continue to be constructive and giving to others as soon
I
as I
think
can.
that's why
Right.
the 12-step program and many other areas in communities, the Serenity Prayer is so very important and very basic, no matter, what your religious affiliation is, or what you call your higher power. And it's important
Exactly.
to,
Yeah.
as to love yourself realistically. I mean, you can't just, nobody can touch me. I can do what I want because I'm perfect when nobody's perfect. But to forgive yourself for when you do have shortcomings without beating yourself up. And I think it's human nature for most of us to kind of shoot ourselves in the feet sometimes when we're trying on the surface to accomplish something great, but we don't truly believe it underneath. And sometimes subconsciously we'll do something to, you know, counteract that effort and create a sense of failure. We have about
Right.
2 minutes left. Why don't you tell people how to reach you? This has been a great show. I appreciate you coming in for 2 weeks like this. Go ahead, get 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for allowing me to just use your platform for the opportunity to just make a difference in this world in a positive way. And that's the key. So I really want to thank you for the chance to do that and say how grateful I am, to be able to be here now and do something that's useful. I mean, people can reach me on at psychologicalinvestigations.com. That's psychologicalinvestigations.com, which is my website. There's lots of information there on the books that I have written, as well as ways to contact me and to read some of the material that I've written over the years that I hope will be of some help to people in all of our personal journey to be all we can be in this world. So I'm very excited about this process moving forward. The work that you do, Peggy, every week here on this podcast to contribute to this world is a great thing, and to be supportive of people and all you've done in the past to
No,
make
well,
that
thank
happen.
you.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure for having you. And I think, I see some shows in the future that would be good for us to do together too. So good luck with your endeavor, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Thank
Everybody
you
have
so
a
much.
we are having a show Memorial Day weekend. Uh, each of the weekends this month, we're doing different mental health topics. So look forward to seeing people next week tuning in. Thank you.
This has been The Holistic Nurse with host Peggy Smith. Tune in each week where you're encouraged to send in questions and receive private responses and suggestions if appropriate. Here's Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern.